So we've already got the Labour Party manifesto. Later on today, we'll be hearing what the Conservative plans are for the economy. On Labour's policy as well, they have announcing today that they will be helping to compensate millions of women who missed out on money because of the rise in the pension age. So that is the plan, current plan put forward by the Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, who joins us now in the studio. Thank you very much for being with us. Now, I'm keen to get on to the details of your manifesto, but I thought I'd just start on Brexit, because Jeremy Corbyn has said this week that if there was a second referendum, he would stay neutral in that campaign. Would you stay neutral?
Members of the Shadow Cabinet will be able, or members of the government at that time, will be able to, well, campaign. And I expect that, as Harold Wilson did, individual members of the party and the Shadow Cabinet and Cabinet then will be able to campaign on the basis of their judgment. The party will meet and discuss, you know, our proposals, which is negotiate a sensible deal, put that back to the British people alongside Remain, and people will have to make a judgment around that deal as against Remain.
And what about you? Well, do you see yourself as staying neutral?
No, I won't, and I don't think Jeremy's asking people to do that.
So where would you fall?
Well, I'll wait until I see the details of the deal that we negotiate. I've set up, until now, I was in the negotiations with the Conservatives for 6 weeks, and I couldn't see a deal even emerging then that could beat Remain. But let's see what we can negotiate. Whatever we do, we've got to arrive at a situation where the jobs in the economy are protected. And on that basis, Jeremy's role, as he says, will be the honest broker. Whatever is then decided will then be implemented by our Labour government. You
say you see Jeremy Corbyn's role as being an honest broker. But some people looking at this will be like, this is the one issue that everyone has got a view on, everyone's got an opinion on, and Jeremy Corbyn, if he's Prime Minister, will just duck out. Is that really leadership?
No, I think there's a different type of leadership that we need at the moment. We don't need a leader that will divide the country. It's divided already. We need a leader who'll build consensus. And I think Jeremy's unique character would enable that to happen. As I say, that honest broker role, listening to different points of view, but then saying, look, when the people have decided, let the people decide, then whatever is decided by those people, he will honestly and fairly and ensure it's implemented. We need a leader like that at the moment to bring the country back together again.
OK. Now, let's move on to some policy, shall we? Because today you are announcing compensation for women who've been impacted by the rise in the state pension age. What are your plans?
It's redress, really. These are the 50s women who paid into their national insurance, expected to be retiring at 60, and then legislation was introduced to extend their retirement age, and they weren't properly informed. They've been to court, they've lost in the first stage of the court, they're now appealing, so I've had to prepare a scheme as though the government had actually lost. We need something that is in place to redress this injustice. And these are women who have done everything asked of them, they've paid in, they expect a retirement age, and then even in court, the government had to admit that within the Department of Work and Pensions, they knew that people hadn't been properly informed. The government's defence then was that legislation doesn't have to be fair, or there's no responsibility or placed upon the government to notify people individually. That's not a good enough defence.
It's expensive, this, though, isn't it? Really expensive.
Well, it's expensive, but this is an entitlement. This is not a benefit.
£58 billion.
Over a 5-year period as well, but this is a historic injustice. We have to address it. Some of these women have been forced into penury, and they were given no adequate notice, they were not properly informed, and it's caused real hardship. And some of these women, if we don't do it now, some of them will no longer be with us. So I think we have a sense of responsibility to address this injustice.
I just want to focus a little bit on the costings of this, because you released your manifesto this week. We can have a little look at the costings of this. So what we're looking at here, I mean, obviously it's very detailed, but effectively all the sort of spending is on the left and how you're going to pay for it is on the right. I can't find this policy in
No, because we're treating this as the way the government would treat it. As in the past, if the government loses in court, it then has to abide by the court decision. We believe we have to abide by this injustice that's taken place.
But hang on a minute, sorry. I know your manifesto is fully costed, but £58 billion, and it's nowhere here.
This is the scorecard of our manifesto implementation. When, on these decisions, as well as the same as the government when they lost in court on the bedroom tax and the lung conditions as well. It's outside of the scorecard. This is a very special arrangement, a contingency, in the same way government has in the past dealt with matters like this. The scale of this injustice is enormous. This is a discrimination against women in particular, older women. It's many of them who are on low pay anyway, but now I think many of them have suffered. So it's an injustice we have to address.
I'm not just debating whether it's an injustice or not. I'm just working out how it's going to be paid for.
Right.
Do you think there's no suggestion then that this is something that you've decided on in the last few days after Boris Johnson was giving a bit of a hard time on this, wasn't he?
We've been working on this we've been working on the last 18 months. We've met all with the different groups, what they call the WASPy groups. We consulted them on a range of proposals, including this, and we came to the conclusion that if we didn't act soon, this suffering and stress would continue on, but also, as I say, some of these women are older and may not be with us if we don't act quickly.
You see, it's not the only thing that isn't in this costing document, is it? No mention of the 4-day week, no mention of the £400 billion National Transformation Fund, no mention of scrapping the state pension age increase, no mention of nationalisation.
With the greatest respect, let's just go through those, shall we? With regard to the 32-hour week over a 10-year period, we've said we will set up a working time commission, which will include employers and trade unions and others. They will work out the proposals and how we implement it over the 10 years. It will only be implemented by increases in productivity within our economy, largely resulting from the investment that we're putting in. It's as simple as that. Secondly, with regard to our National Transformation Fund, it's referred to in the Grey Book, as we call this Grey Book, which is the detailed costing. I want to see the Tory one, by the way. I doubt if it's anything like this, but we'll see.
Well, we'll find out later.
Well, we'll see. You'll see. The National Transformation Fund is separate from the Grey Book. We make reference to it here, and is the capital programme. But, of course, the costs of that are all considered here.
I mean, I just wonder, though, like, if people feel that they just can't trust some of the costings that you've
let me just go
because
through
you are spending an awful lot of money here, and you're also expecting to borrow a lot of money here as well, aren't you? How much are you going to borrow?
Let me just go through it step by step. What this book does, it sets out our manifesto commitments, costed and the funding sources. It also obviously relates to the National Transformation Fund. Let me just take you through
which is the borrowing.
That's right. So this is £83 billion worth of revenue expenditure that we're going to end austerity and fund our public services and address some of the poverty and hardship that people experience at the moment. Let me just finish on this. We also have a National Transformation Fund, contains two elements. One is a Green Transformation Fund to tackle climate change, £250 billion over a 10-year programme, moving us from fossil fuels onto alternative energy sources, wave, solar, wind power, and retrofitting people's homes, so we insulate people's homes.
Okay.
That's the way. The second thing is a £150 billion social transformation fund over 5 years, which will build us the homes that we need, invest in our health service, our schools, and in that way we're rebuilding our public services.
Okay. My next question is one of trust.
Yeah.
Because I just want to show you a quick video of you speaking on Tuesday. This is what you had to say on Tuesday.
Earlier this week and over the weekend, there were reports that Labour is planning a windfall tax on oil companies. Is this true? And if so, please could you set out how your proposals would work?
Great. Okay, John.
Okay. On the willful tax on oil companies, no. No.
Pretty simple.
I've leaked the manifesto already.
I mean, on page 15 of the manifesto, it says, we will introduce a windfall tax on oil companies.
What I was being asked there by the Daily Telegraph reporter was, would I give the details of the windfall tax? And I wouldn't.
Well, we just heard the question. You said, no, that's a leak of the manifesto.
But if you listen to the question itself, he's asking me...
He said, will there be a windfall tax?
No, but he's asking, will you give us the details of it? And I said, no. What? Listen to the question.
He said, will there be a windfall tax?
He said, will there be a windfall tax and will you give the details of that? And I said, no, I'm not going to release the manifesto 2 days ago.
Can you not see why many people listening to that will feel that you've said one thing and then a couple of days later you've done...
If you listen carefully enough, that's exactly what he asked me, would I give the details of it? And I said, no.
It's a trust issue, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and that's why I published this. That's why it sets out in detail where the funding will come from.
You've also made a promise that no one who earns less than £80,000 will pay more in taxes, that the tax burden will fall only on the richest.
What we've said, let's be clear, what we've said, there'll be no increase in the income tax rates for those below £80,000. The top 5% will pay more in income tax, but others, the 95%, will not pay. They will not have an increase in their income tax rates or VAT or national insurance.
But we have to be honest with people, don't we? Because although there may not be any increase in income tax, people earning less than this will see more increases in other taxes, won't they? If there is a Labour government, you want to scrap the marriage tax allowance, for example. That would fall on people earning underneath £80,000 a year. You want to extend the sugar tax. That will impact everybody, effectively, won't it? So don't we need... If you want to transform the economy, if you want to make this spending, if you want to increase the state... Don't we just have to be a bit more honest about what it means? It means all of us paying more in taxes,
well, that's why
not just the wealthiest, not just other people.
Well, that's exactly why I published this. I've said very, very clearly what our income tax proposals will be, what will happen on VAT.
So you'll admit then that everyone will end up paying more in taxes under the Labour government?
Let me just go through it. What we've done is we've said we'll be absolutely explicit and straightforward about where we will find the funding that we need and where that funding will go.
So can you Can you admit that everybody, not just the top 5%, will end up paying more taxes under a Labour government?
Well, what we're saying very clearly in terms of income tax, only the top 5% will have an increase in income tax.
I'm not just talking about income tax.
Well, I'm saying what our rules are. 95% of the population, 95% of earners will not have an increase in their income tax rates or VAT or national insurance. Where there will be other elements of changes in taxation rates, we've laid them out here as well. And what we're trying to do is have a fair taxation system. And I've been very explicit. The highest earners will pay a bit more, but also we're reversing
some... And so will others as well.
Well, we're reversing some of the corporation tax cuts. We're introducing a financial transaction tax on the city, not a great deal, just asking the city to pay its way a bit more. We bailed the banks out 10 years ago. We're asking them to pay a bit more back. Well, we're also saying we're going to tackle tax evasion and tax avoidance.
Okay.
There'll be other elements, yes, that we've set out here where there's been tax giveaways, and we're saying some of those will be taken out to do what? To invest in our public services.
I want to talk a bit about business, because on the show last Sunday, I spoke to Carolyn Fairbairn, who is the boss of the CBI, one of the leading business groups. And this is what she said to me. She said, "We really understand the questions that Labour are asking, but we look at the policies on the table and we have real concerns that they are going to crack the foundations of our economy." I just wonder, groups like these business groups, does it bother you that they're scared of the thought of a Labour government? Or do you think, actually, that's just because they're worried about change, they're the enemy?
No, they're not the enemy at all. People do get worried about change, but I meet with Carolyn and the other representatives of the business group. Jeremy Corbyn and I meet with them, I think we're virtually monthly now, in which we talk about our proposals and our plans. We listen to their views and take some of their views into account, of course. But the more important thing, we've said to them, come into government with us. And what I said to Carolyn in the meeting before last that we had, bring forward your proposals about how you want to come into government with us, how you can help us shape policy, but more importantly, how you can deliver them. In that way, over time, you build confidence.
Do you think they are a bit scared of you, then?
No, I don't think they are, because I've been... Look, you've heard this before.
She sounds a little bit from the quote she said, crack the foundations of our economy.
She's representing some of her member organisations who are going to pay a bit more taxes. Of course, she's going to have to represent some of their views. But when I meet with asset managers, with pension fund managers and business leaders, I talk them through our investment plans. I talk them through about how we could decarbonise our economy, and they're up for this. They are really up for it.
Are you happy to see billionaires in the UK?
Sorry, say again?
Are you happy to see billionaires in the UK?
I want to have a more equal society. Billionaires exist, but I would like a much more equal society. Well, I'd like a more equal society if we could. And I think it's about making sure that when we create our new economy, it's a stakeholder economy where everyone has a share in it, and also where everyone gets the rewards that they deserve, but they're distributed more fairly. And I think I meet with very rich people in the city and elsewhere, and they don't want to be stepping over homeless people when they come out of their offices. They don't want to live in...
So do they need to pay more?
Well, they are paying more. Under our proposals, a little bit more. And they don't want to live in gated communities. They want to live in a society which is safe, so we have a proper police service properly funded. They want to ensure that when they have emergency treatment, often that emergency treatment for them, even the wealthiest, is through an NHS hospital. They want it properly funded.
Now, while we've got another big issue of this election campaign has been the prospect of Scottish independence. We're talking to Nicola Sturgeon a bit later on the programme, and I just want to ask you quickly about Labour's position on granting another second independence referendum. This is what your manifesto says on it. In the early years of the UK Labour government, we will not agree to a Section 30 order request for another referendum if it comes from the Scottish government. Yeah. What does early years mean?
Well, those first few years when we're getting on with the job.
Just be really specific. What does that mean?
I wouldn't expect anything in the first 2 or 3 years, because the Scottish people themselves are saying we've got to concentrate on austerity and get that sorted. We've got to concentrate on sorting out Brexit. Above all else, we've got an existential threat of climate change. That's a huge agenda, and we see the independence issue in terms of a potential referendum as a distraction from that.
So even if it's a red line for the SNP that it would have to be in the first 2 to 3 years, that's not something that you would give any ground on?
No, we wouldn't, because we've...
So after 2021?
Out there, last year 700 people died on our streets homeless. We need to start building homes. Schools are still having cuts, class sizes increasing, infant mortality going up. We've got to address the priorities, the real issues facing our community, and that's what we'll do.
Just finally, it's clear that you want to desperate to get into number 11. We'll find out in a few weeks if you manage to do that. If you don't, you'll have lost your second election in 3 years. Is this your last chance?
We're going to win.
Is it your last chance?
We're going to win.
I admire the optimism. Would you put money on it?
I've given up on gambling. It was one of my New Year's resolutions, but we're going to win.
OK. John McDonnell, thank you very much for coming on the programme today.